This year's flood in China has shocked the world. Thousands of homes were destroyed, and many people were swept away by the floodwaters. Now that the flood has receded, it has left behind a scene of devastated houses. The effort to rebuild will take a long time to complete. Moreover, after the floodwaters recede, they might bring along infectious diseases, environmental sanitation issues, problems with food supply, and clean drinking water. But a more important question is why almost every year in China, under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, there are such severe floods. According to CCP's media, the blame is placed on excessive rainfall. They label it as a natural disaster. While the disaster certainly results from heavy rainfall, it's also because the CCP's government has been damaging nature over the years, building hydroelectric dams recklessly to make money. Many Chinese citizens claim that this disaster occurred because the CCP released water from dams and diverted floodwaters without warning. Facing the callousness of Beijing officials who, while releasing floodwaters, caused the deaths of thousands and left millions homeless, the national CCTV television station shirked responsibility and even broadcasted false news to deceive the people. Officials relaxed while vacationing in Beidai, preparing for internal power struggles. Thousands of people in Hebei province had to struggle to survive after the flood. They had to take to the streets in protest, which led to violent clashes with the police. Will the people of China awaken before it's too late? In today's program, let's explore the cruelty of the CCP and its response to this flood disaster. Letting out floodwaters without warning ahead of time turns natural disasters into huge catastrophes. In this current flood disaster, the sudden rise in water levels that caught Chinese citizens off guard has led to a grave catastrophe. The cause is the emergency release of floodwaters from reservoirs, but the CCP failed to provide advance warnings for downstream residents to evacuate, resulting in severe casualties. Particularly alarming are instances when reservoirs secretly release floodwaters in the middle of the night, and people wake up at dawn to find their surroundings submerged in water. Surviving such situations is a stroke of luck. Why are flood releases not preceded by warnings? There are various opinions on this matter. Some believe that authorities fear taking responsibility, so they secretly release floodwaters at night without informing the public. Others argue that the government doesn't want to compensate citizens for damages, so they avoid flood warnings. They wait until floodwaters submerge everything, then attribute it to heavy rainfall. For example, during the recent flooding in Bazhou district, while CCTV blamed the flooding on heavy rain, the reality was that the flooding resulted from reservoir releases. This caused anger among the people of Bazhou, who protested in front of the local government building. As a result, they were met with violent police action. Offering up citizens as sacrifices to safeguard the capital and CCP officials. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, system is not a conventional government, rather, it's a system that views serving in an official capacity as the objective and value to strive for, or an ideology centered around power. As a result, when officials contemplate any decision, their primary concern often isn't the citizens, but rather the central party and their own official standings. At the onset of the flood, Ni Feng, the party secretary of Hebei province, publicly stated the need to reduce the pressure of flood prevention and control in Beijing, and resolutely fulfill the role of the city to protect the capital. As a result, floodwaters were diverted and released into areas like Shuozhou and Hebei province. While Beijing and the new Xiong'an district remained safe, Shuozhou and Hebei became the hardest hit areas with heavy casualties. As is known, in the past, local leaders in China were referred to as local parent officials, meaning that they would care for the people as their own children, and people could trust the officials. However, under the CCP system, the top priority of local leaders is to support the central party and to seize opportunities for personal advancement during chaotic times, which elevates the central party's influence. The number of people who may sacrifice their lives is essentially of little concern to these officials. This mentality of protecting the capital is protecting the officials has been prevalent in the history of the CCP. For instance, during the 3 years of famine in China in 1960, Li Jingquan, the party secretary of Sichuan province at that time, insisted on diverting Sichuan's grain to Beijing. He chose to let the people of Sichuan starve rather than the people of Beijing. The result led to millions of people in Sichuan dying of hunger. Armed police take over the flood-affected area, clean up the scene, prevent information leaks, and conceal the disaster. On August 5, Mr. Chen, a local resident, told the Epoch Times that 500 personnel from the Hebei Armed Police Force arrived in Zhuozhou that day to take over rescue operations, and all civilian rescue forces were instructed to evacuate. After the Hebei Armed Police Force took over local rescue operations, the civilian rescue teams were asked to leave the scene. Local residents mentioned that dead bodies were scattered throughout the village alone, and these officials demanded that the civilian rescue teams leave the scene mainly out of concern that the truth of the disaster would be exposed. A report from the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda team has been leaked online, revealing that the party is extremely worried about the real situation becoming public. The report says, "We found that some rescue teams unlawfully used mobile networks during the rescue process, spreading negative information and images about the rescue to the outside world with bad intentions. This seriously damaged our district's image." Rescue forces unable to access disaster area. On August 1, Southern Weekend newspaper revealed that many private rescue teams had arrived in Zhuozhou but were blocked. According to regulations, non-local civilian rescue teams need an invitation from the Emergency Management Authority where the incident occurred before being allowed to conduct cross-provincial rescues. Afterward, they must report to the local Emergency Management Authority, and only after approval can the rescue teams start their operations. Online videos show that many rescue vehicles were stopped on the highway, preventing them from entering the disaster area. Since they didn't have invitations and Zhuozhou authorities had no one to receive these teams, they couldn't proceed with their rescue efforts. After the news was disclosed, it sparked outrage on social media, accusing the government of having too many complicated procedures and disregarding the lives of victims. Under public pressure, Zhuozhou officials announced on August 2 that private rescue teams no longer needed invitations to enter Zhuozhou as long as they registered their information. However, just as the rescue operations were commencing, on August 3, there were reports that Zhuozhou authorities did not act on this announcement. More than 70 out of over 100 local civilian rescue teams were forced to evacuate. Not only were the rescue teams evacuated, but the accounts of many rescuers were also blocked. Commentator Tang Jingyuan on current affairs issues mentioned that according to the consistent practice of the CCP, this was to strictly seal off news and prevent the spread of the grim truth of the disaster-stricken area as much as possible. An online chat message from Beijing's rescue forces revealed that Mentugu district in Beijing had been hit by the flood on July 31, and over 200 victims' bodies were found at the disaster site. However, officials reported only over 20 deaths. Wang Weiluo, an expert living in Germany, pointed out that there are still many issues regarding this flood that the outside world cannot see, mainly due to undisclosed information. He speculated that other areas in Hebei might be more severely affected than Zhuozhou. Trying to prevent disasters is just empty talk. A few days before the flood disaster struck, the media, under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, extensively promoted Xi Jinping's new book on flood control, titled "Delve Deep into Studying and Implementing Xi Jinping's Important Expositions on Flood Control." They praised Xi as pointing out the forward direction of flood control in the new era and claimed that his flood control ideology is summarized in a 16-character motto: prioritize water conservation, balance spatial distribution, manage systems, and make dual efforts. This 16-character motto might sound lofty, but in reality, they are just empty words. The truth also reveals a stark difference between Xi Jinping's flood control approach and the disaster preparedness methods employed by the rest of the world. People around the world know that whenever a major storm or heavy rainfall is imminent, not only do the standard armed forces prepare in advance for disaster response, ready to deploy for rescue operations at any moment, but national leaders also typically visit disaster response command centers to monitor and gather the latest information. They also remind citizens about the latest disaster preparedness information. For example, whenever a typhoon approaches Taiwan, the president monitors the Central Emergency Operations Center and calls on the public to prepare and know where to evacuate. In the United States, before a storm hits, the president often holds press conferences to encourage citizens to prepare for the impending disaster. However, Xi Jinping, who supposedly outlined the new era's flood control direction, has not shown any concrete deployment or specific command before heavy rainfall occurs. This lack of preparation led to the sudden onslaught of a massive flood that caught both the government and citizens off guard, ultimately resulting in the largest flood disaster in half a century. Therefore, the flood control motto, presentation, and analysis that the CCP claims are all empty words, devoid of substance. High officials avoid responsibility, don't know anything. In normal countries around the world, when a major disaster strikes the public, it's essential for national leaders to be on the front line to express condolences, inquire about the disaster, and assess the situation. This is a common practice. For example, in 2018, when a major flood occurred in Chiayi City, Taiwan, President Tsai Ing-wen drove in an armored vehicle to the disaster site to assess the situation. However, the people shouted at her, demanding that she get out of the vehicle and experience the suffering of those affected by the disaster firsthand. Tsai Ing-wen did indeed step out of the vehicle and walked, accepting the grievances and complaints of the affected citizens. This on-site assessment not only conveys empathy to the victims and addresses the public's concerns, but also focuses more resources on disaster relief efforts and quicker restoration of order in the affected area. However, in this Hebei flood disaster, which clearly occurred near the capital city of Beijing, not a single member of the 7-member Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the Chinese Communist Party's Central Committee was seen to assess the disaster situation. Even Xi Jinping himself was nowhere to be found. Even in Zhuozhou, the city hit hardest by the disaster, the mayor and the city's party secretary were absent. What's more ironic is that the Chinese Communist Party's media channels claim that Xi Jinping personally commanded and arranged flood control efforts, comparing it to his directives during the pandemic. But whether in Hebei or Heilongjiang, he has never appeared at the disaster sites. So, how can he personally command and arrange? Hence, while the Chinese Communist Party constantly proclaims to serve the people, when the people are in dire straits, party officials scramble to avoid responsibility and disappear. Why is that? Firstly, it's due to fear of facing criticism from disaster-affected citizens and the international community. Secondly, there's concern that their personal safety might be compromised. Thirdly, to shift responsibility, especially for high-ranking officials of the party's Central Committee, all they need to do is stay out of the picture, and they can easily shift blame onto local officials, while still maintaining their own image of being great, glorious, and correct. This is the genuine thought process of high-ranking Chinese Communist Party officials. Fabricating fake videos and images, exploiting disasters for CCP propaganda. Whenever a major disaster occurs, it's the most exciting time for the Chinese Communist Party's media outlets because it provides them with an opportunity to grandiosely stage and fabricate content for their propaganda purposes. For instance, the most infamous distortion in the media coverage of the floods in Hebei is the dramatic rescue helicopter seen by CCTV. The government deployed helicopters and photographers to rooftops to rescue affected people, creating a sense of extreme danger. However, the camera unintentionally captured the water level at the scene, showing that the water only reached up to the car's wheel. The shallow flooding was turned into a Hollywood-style rescue mission, effectively illustrating the party's concern and protection for people's lives. Some managed to capture local authorities pretending to carry sandbags to build flood barriers. In reality, this was just a deception aimed at impressing superiors while misleading the public. There's even a photo from Xinhua News Agency where soldiers seem to be stacking sandbags. However, did you notice the prominently displayed party flag and the troop numbers in the foreground? Frankly speaking, this is a textbook staged composition meant to highlight the CCP and the military's insignia to gain recognition from the leadership. Looking at another picture, soldiers are evidently depicted combating the disaster in the darkness, with a pitch-black backdrop, yet the party flag in the distance is deliberately illuminated to stand out. This is not just a clearly fake photo but a deliberate exploitation of people's suffering to glorify the CCP. Therefore, the CCP's organized mourning ceremonies and support for the disabled are another artificial disaster created by the CCP. Hence, when CCP media outlets don't report the truth of the disaster and casualties, it's not surprising. But what they consistently do is release a large number of fake photos and videos, meticulously staged to deceive the people and seek personal gain. This is utterly deceptive and detrimental behavior by CCP media outlets. The Communist Party is a bad force against the universe. The CCP must be destroyed. The 9 commentaries on the Communist Party points out that the Communist Party is a bad force against the universe. The CCP has 9 major bad genes: evil, deception, manipulation, conflict, seizing, thuggery, division, annihilation, control. Its badness can prevail because of the belief that humans can overcome nature. Nowadays, more and more people no longer believe in the deceptive words of communism. However, the CCP's evil system still controls people, and its culture erodes people's souls. The Communist Party promotes the idea that humans can overcome nature, disregarding the natural order. The Communist Party might find true joy in this, but the people suffer greatly because of it. There was a time when the CCP implemented an agriculture policy focused on grain production. They extensively cultivated unsuitable mountainous and grassland areas, and filled in China's rivers and lakes. The result was massive destruction of China's natural ecology. Today, China's environment is on the verge of collapse, with rivers like the Hai and Yellow River drying up, and pollution in the Huai and Yangtze River cutting off the lifeblood of the Chinese nation. Grasslands in Gansu, Qinghai, Inner Mongolia, and Xinjiang have disappeared, and rolling sandstorms hit the Central Plains. This year, the CCP has again implemented policies like returning farmland to forest, destroying once recovered forest areas in many places. The CCP, with an aggressive stance, plundered the land, oppressed and exploited its people, going against nature and defying natural laws. In the end, it will surely face punishment from the heavens, earth, and natural order. Recently, a Chinese citizen named Dong Hui expressed on a website for quitting the CCP, the evil party, in order to protect Beijing and Xi Jinping's so-called millennial plan for the Xiongnu area, is willing to unleash floods to inundate Hebei. The party's officials are useless, only singing praises and letting Hebei act as a moat for the capital. They don't care about people's lives. Various natural disasters and human calamities show that the CCP is about to be destroyed, and it must be. Zhang Tianyi from Hebei stated, in June 2019, various domestic platforms were uniformly claiming that the Hong Kong protests were incited by the US and UK. But I felt something was off. Even a county magistrate listens to both sides before making a decision, but in China, under the CCP's rule, there's simply no other voice. So, in June 2020, I successfully bypassed the Great Firewall using technical means. Over the past 3 years, I've witnessed the darkness under the CCP system, the secondary disasters during the pandemic, and the sins of history. What is hell? I think China under CCP rule is a vivid example. I'm fortunate that I was able to free myself from the brainwashing. But I'm also unfortunate because of my morals and conscience. They prevent me from doing harmful things and harming others for money, which also means I can't earn enough to escape this hell. Perhaps the most tragic are not those brainwashed, but people like me who recognize the CCP's evil but are powerless. Finally, I willingly quit the Young Pioneers and Communist Youth League. Ma Yuyuan stated, under the rule of the communist bandits, most people don't live like human beings, yet they don't realize it. From birth, education requires money, and as you grow up, buying a house comes with a mortgage, which makes people's minds focused only on earning money. They can't afford to get sick, and the money they earn isn't enough to pay the hospital. What's most infuriating is that the thoughts of everyone have been numbed. People living in the country are worse off than leaks. They are like miners under the communist bandits. The party and the nation are two different things. Not loving the party doesn't mean not loving the country. I hope Chinese people with thoughts will work together to overthrow it and give our country a better future. I declare quitting the Communist Youth League and Young Pioneers. The Tuodang movement, also known as the Quitting the Chinese Communist Party movement, is a non-violent movement in China that urges citizens to sever their connections with the CCP and its affiliated organizations. This is achieved through a public declaration renouncing any previous ties with the party, including its affiliated groups like the Communist Youth League and Young Pioneers. These disavowals are collectively known as the Three Withdrawals. The Tuodang movement was triggered by the editorial series 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party, first published in the Chinese-language edition of the Epoch Times on November 19, 2004. The series comprehensively exposes the bloody history of the CCP and gives an in-depth analysis of the deceptive, violent, cultish, and rogue nature of the party in different areas of history, politics, economy, culture, and faith. Tuodang is facilitated in China by an estimated 20 million volunteers, many of them practitioners of Falun Gong, a traditional spiritual practice targeted for eradication by the CCP since 1999. According to globaltuodang.org, at the time this video was published, more than 417 million Chinese individuals have decided to quit the CCP and its affiliated organizations. This is a nightmare for the Chinese Communist Party, as the collapse is coming from within. The doomsday of the Chinese Communist Party is getting closer and closer. If you are a Chinese person who was once a member of the CCP and its associated organizations, we strongly encourage you to declare your withdrawal from these groups for the sake of a brighter future. Simply click on the link tuodang.org, choose I want to withdraw from the CCP, and follow the provided instructions to submit your information. The link will be provided in the video's description below. We value your thoughts and opinions on today's topic, so don't forget to leave a comment in the section below. Share your insights and join the discussion. If you want to stay updated with more captivating topics from China Truths, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more intriguing content.